thought I would start with initially talking about what happened in the cabinet meeting today, which was, in my opinion, pretty like hilarious. And I have to say this as an outsider from Australia who talks a lot about American politics. Hi, Alice. Nice to see you again. As an Australian who talks a lot about American politics, one of the things that I notice a lot of is that we often, when in people in Australia or Europe or Scandinavia or anywhere like that, or the UK, talk about American politics, is we often get told to like mind your own business, don't tell us what to do, worry about your own country first. And what I saw in the cabinet meeting today with Trump and little Marco Rubio and a whole bunch of those other people is one of the reasons why we can't keep our eyes off the sort of train wreck that's happening in the United States. Um, when you have Donald Trump, like in one of the seats, Mel, I'm so embarrassed by my country. It's truly embarrassing for those who voted for the stupidity. Yeah, exactly, Mel. Yeah. And look, I think a lot of people in Australia, for example, they differentiate between hi, Mary from Australia. There's another fellow Aussie here, Mary. She's another Aussie from Melbourne. There's not many of us here. Hi, boy. Good to see you. And what I've noticed is, hey, g'day, Mary. Is that a lot of people, and Mary will tell you this as well, is we don't differentiate. We differentiate between people who voted for lunchtime here. Yes, perfect. People who've voted for Trump and people who didn't vote for Trump, right? And there's a lot of people in Australia differentiate between those two type of people. And for that reason, I think people in America, we want you to know that we're on the side of the people who didn't vote for Trump. We don't think everyone in America is crazy. We think America's been run by a madman, an authoritarian. The bathrobe guy, nice to see you again, the bathrobe guy. It's been a while since I've seen you. And so just good to know that America, that we don't all think that you're all crazy. I'm pretty sure the statistics show that only about 30% of eligible voters actually voted for Trump, which goes to show that the majority of Americans didn't vote for him. But in saying that, there is so much crazy stuff that goes on in America. We can't keep our eyes off it because what America does affects the rest of the world. America isn't some, hello everyone, peace and meta. Nice to see you, bathroom guy. Nice to see you again. And it's also so we want you to know that we do actually, we're on your side and we support you, and we're not laughing. I don't feel sorry for the red maggers. Yeah, same, Mary. Yeah, but there's so many people in America who didn't vote for Trump, and we feel sorry for those people. We're here to support you guys. We want you guys to know that we're supporting you guys, and we're friends. We're allies of you guys. So watching the meeting today just showed one of the reasons why it's just so insane. Because during the cabinet meeting, you have Trump like falling asleep, literally falling asleep, while little Marco Rubio, right, is talking about how, and so the camera is like, your support is appreciated. Thanks, Mark, my words. The camera is panned in on both of them. So you can see Marco Rubio on one side and you can see Trump on the other side. And Trump is just fallen asleep. And while Marco Rubio is talking about the war in Ukraine, and he says the only person who can stop the war in Ukraine is Donald Trump. And why he's saying that, Trump is asleep, right? So he's saying, so little Marco Rubio is talking about Trump is the only person who can stop the war, this and that. And he's just asleep. He's literally just asleep. I mean, if this happened in any other country, it would just be like, front page news. And what I do notice is that when things like that happen in America, where he falls asleep or something, is that mainstream media, a lot of the times, they actually don't even talk about it. Like I read the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all that, and they rarely ever mention that stuff. So they will talk about what was talked about during the cabinet meeting, which is important. We need to know that. But with Trump falling asleep or saying things that are silly, they actually don't really talk about it much. The only time they've really taken it seriously was a couple of weeks ago, where the New York Times did a big story about how behind the scenes Trump is cutting back his hours that he can work because he's getting really tired. He's obviously having troubles with standing up. But besides that article, they've been very quiet on a lot of the stuff that's going on. Hi T, good to see you. Thanks for joining. And so I that concerns me. That mainstream media doesn't take it seriously. And look, I'm saying that from someone who I thought Joe Biden probably should have stepped aside earlier and let a primary happen. Hi Kimmy, good to see you again, Kimmy. Hi Car, good to see you again. And so again, I'm someone who thought that Joe Biden should have stepped aside earlier. Um, but it's obvious. Hi, Sandra. Good to see you, Sandra. Good to see you again. Thanks. Hey, Car. Good to see you. And I think so. A lot of that stuff that we're seeing, hi, is really. So we're just talking about the cabinet meeting. Trump is mentally incompetent and should have been removed from office long ago. Yeah, the bathroom guy. Yeah, yep. Mary, forget about the Washington Post now. So right wing. Yeah, exactly. Hi, Liana. Thanks for joining. Yeah, exactly. And we are noticing that. I'm noticing that they treat they treat Trump very differently to how they treat Biden. With Biden, it was always about, like, when he was interviewed, they would say things like, "Oh, are you sure that you're okay at the moment?" and all that sort of stuff, and I'd be like, "Oh, yeah." But with Trump, been watching the special elections, it's so close. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to be watching that as well. I mean, Sandra, the thing about the special elections is it. And hi, Louise, thanks for joining. The thing about the special elections is I it doesn't even matter if the Democrats don't lose that race in the South, because it they lost by such a large margin in 2024 that if they only lose by 1 or 2%, that's a massive win for the Democrats. So it's not even about whether the Democrats win. I think the Democrats have less of a chance of winning, but if they come close in a place like that, what does that say about other places that are like, 60-40, only 5%, 5% difference, all that sort of stuff as well. So again, I think I think it's going to be really close. But going back to like the cabinet meeting, it was just crazy, Donald Trump at his craziest. Then he starts talking about then Donald Trump starts talking about, hi Marnie, thanks for joining. She's ahead right now. Oh my God, really? Okay, yeah, yeah. Sandra. I won't get my hopes up because I know a lot of times during elections, if they're really close, if they start counting in one area, like the rural areas, then that can be more reds. If they start counting more in the cities, that could be that. So I won't get my hopes up until she actually wins. Hi, Marnie. Hey, good to see you. But I really hope if she actually wins this, I mean, to be honest with you, if she actually wins this in that state, I think we're going to see another mini civil war within the party because, hi Dave from California, because what we're seeing now, in my opinion, I don't think Trump is going to go to 2028. I know there's a lot of people on Substack or online who think Trump is definitely going to try in 2028. And hi Dave, and it's not because I don't think Trump would try to to go another a go. I don't think it's because of the laws and that. I think it's because Trump is too old. Come on, you can see it. He can't. He's falling asleep. He doesn't like standing up. I don't. I think that's the main reason he's not going to run again. He's going to have to campaign. Can you imagine Trump doing those 3 or 4 hour rallies, right? Back in like he did last year. He's and by the way, once you're 80 and you go 81, 82, you don't reverse age. He's going to get more tired. His legs are going to hurt more. Smash those hearts for Joe. Thank you, Marnie. And again, so a lot of that stuff I think is going to show that that Trump won't run again. And because I think a lot of sorry, I'm getting you sidetracked. They are neck and neck though. Oh, good, Sandra. That's really good to hear. That's really good to hear. Um, but yeah, going back to the cabinet meeting. The other thing I liked about the cabinet meeting was when Christy Nome. This was the funniest part for me. This part I loved. Christy Nome goes, Mr. Trump, thank you so much. We didn't have many hurricanes this year. I think she said we didn't have any hurricanes this year, so we'd like to thank you for that. So she's 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 thanking Donald Trump for not having not having many hurricanes or not having any hurricanes at all. What kind of insanity is this? Like, honestly, I'm not even sure if in North Korea they would go that far. I really, I haven't seen. I've seen footage of Kim Jong Il with a lot of his sycophants around him saying like how amazing he is and how his. I don't remember anyone, even in North Korea, saying, thank you, Kim Jong il, for not letting us have any hurricanes or disasters or anything like that. That is how far gone. He can move hurricanes with a black Sharpie, Joe. Yeah, that's true money. That I forgot about that. Yeah. Or if you listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene, um, and other people like that, they will say things like that the Democrats were actually causing hurricanes. Do you remember that when they said that the Democrats were deliberately causing hurricanes to make MAGA look bad? I mean, it's like crazy. And then you get Trump. Hi, Trish, good to see you. And then you get Trump basically talking about. Trump always loves to talk about how smart he is. He's the smartest person, and he likes to call other people dumb and stupid. It's just all just green screen money. Yeah, yeah. And um, and no, it's not. It's real bathroom guy. He's really stopping those hurricanes. Hey Joe, hi Trish, good to see you. These days I only feel safe when Trump is asleep. Unfortunately, he keeps waking up. Hi Betty, good to see you. Yeah, that's true, Mark. You know, my favorite part about online. So I was on Twitter earlier today, and everyone on the liberal side were posting like videos of Trump falling asleep while Trump's falling asleep while Marco Rubio's talking, and then all the influencers on Twitter like Benny Johnson and all these people, they have like millions of views and people and stuff like that. Um, a lot of these people were saying, you know what? Um, well, they started posting like collections of photos of like Joe Biden at the beach napping. So you had all these photos of Joe Biden at the beach napping, and that was their comeback to Trump falling asleep during the cabinet meeting. Like the idea that that's a good comeback of someone asleep at the beach, right? And they always show that same photo. You always see it. They love showing that photo of Joe Biden asleep at the beach. He's at the beach. Like he's not in a cabinet meeting. He's not talking to. So he's like that's what people do. They go to the beach, they relax, they maybe read a book, they maybe fall asleep. That's kind of the whole idea of going to the beach. Now, the idea that if you're a MAGA person and you think it's a really good response to a video of Donald Trump falling asleep during a cabinet meeting where they're talking about war crimes, they're talking about the war in Ukraine, and they're talking about all these serious issues, and you've got reporters there and he's falling asleep during that, and you're thinking to yourself, you know what? I'm going to show these libtards a thing or two. Let me find that photo of Joe Biden asleep at the beach, and I'm going to checkmate these people. And then they post it, and then we're all supposed to be like, "Oh my God, you got us." I'm like, how? That's not fair. You showed us a picture of Joe Biden falling asleep at the beach. We got, thank you. Yeah. Like, it's just these people, like, it to me encapsulates how ridiculous, exactly, Sandra, how ridiculous these people are. Like, they loved, hi, Donna. Good to see you again, Donna. Thank you. They love showing that photo of Joe Biden on the beach. Like, it's just so crazy to me, and they're so happy about when they do it. That's the funniest thing. They think they got you. They think like they're like, "Oh, Joe Thomas," because I reply to some of these people on Twitter, and they're like, "We got you, Joe Thomas. We got you good." What about? And one of them actually sent me. a collection of Joe Biden on the beach. So there was like 10 photos of Joe Biden on the beach. And I was like, yeah, but every single photo is him on the beach. Like, can't you at least send me a photo of Joe Biden falling asleep during a cabinet meeting? Is he sleepy, Donnie John? I think he is, bathroom guy. When it comes to MAGA, every accusation is a confession. So all this time that Trump was calling him, and look, I've got to admit, Sleepy Joe was kind of like a nickname that kind of a little bit suited Joe to some degree, because he was kind of like laid back and stuff. But it's the self-delusion that comes from drinking too much orange. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea that, like, it's just like, why? And then he calls everybody stupid. Like, he calls reporters stupid, or, he loves calling people silly. And that's one of his biggest thing, about calling people stupid. And then you think, and then in the next sentence, after he's called someone stupid, he will talk about how he passed a cognitive test. And then, like, we all know that a cognitive test is generally is for people who've got like dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. You're so cool. Thanks for what you do. That orange clown is trying. Thanks, Donna. Thank you. Stupid is as stupid does. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just ridiculous. It seems like sometimes I think, because, Trump is the kind of person who thinks a lot about how to how to gaslight people. And in his past, because he comes from TV, he comes from that background, that world of marketing. He thinks it's a damn IQ test. I know, Trish, I know. And sometimes I think to myself that when Trump calls people stupid or he makes fun of Sleepy Joe, right? I sometimes think it's one of those things where, if you know deep down inside that you're actually the stupid one, and the reason you're doing it is to deflect away from what you deep down inside know. So if you call everybody stupid, then to some degree it's like an abusive relationship, right? Someone might call the other person stupid because they feel stupid themselves. And as an MRI, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Good point, Barth. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, exactly. So, it's a thing like where I feel like Trump does probably feel like he is stupid. And so I think that's why he's projecting that onto other people, because I really do think he knows he's not that intelligent. I mean, he started a university called Trump University, and that university wasn't actually even a university, right? A judge called it a sham, a scam. And so, he couldn't even start like a proper university. And everyone around him, like Pete Hegseth and all those type of people, they're basically just like yes people. He picks people who he thinks they look good on camera, who look good on TV. He doesn't pick them on substance. He calls Somalians, like the other horrible thing he said today. He's stupid, but it's always about women reporters. Yeah, yeah. And look, sometimes he calls men reporters stupid, but I do feel he's more respectful to men reporters than he is to women reporters. But reality TV influencers, yeah, yeah, he surrounded himself. It's like a reality TV show, and that's to me, a very American thing. Even though I know that Trump is unique in America in terms of how far he's taken it, I don't think it's a coincidence that Trump existed in America and not in Australia and other countries. Although, other countries have had their own versions of Donald Trump, but not to the same extent. And I think only a country that TV, movies is such a big part of its culture, right? It could have come from someone like that could have come from there. Because you look at it, like Arnold Schwarzenegger was he was like an action guy, and suddenly he's the governor of California. Yes, he's a wicked misogynist. We kind of knew what grabbing women by the pussy. Exactly, bathroom guy. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's not highly unusual that Trump appeared in America and not somewhere else, because in Australia, Europe, we're not as upset. When we think of TVs and movies, we more think about the United States because most of the movies come from that area. Reality TV comes more from the United States. It's not that we don't have our own, it's that it's more of a bigger culture in America. A lot of the things started in America. So, I think from that point of view, it shows that, it's not a big surprise. In Australia, for example, you don't have celebrities so much in politics. It happens sometimes, but it's not that, you might sometimes get like a ex-football player or something, or something like that, but it's very rare, to happen, and they're not usually the prime minister or anything like that. So again, I do feel like that. But when he talked about Somalia and he called Somalians garbage, I was wondering what was going. Like he says a lot of awful things about people from like Haitians or Somalians. Obviously, generally people from like poorer countries, generally people black people, and he will say things like all they do. Like when he was talking about Somalia, he said the only thing they do is complain. Right? Now, that is just such a weird thing to say about Somalians because a lot of the people who actually were hired by Somalians, a lot of the businesses that hire Somalians actually said they were very hard workers, and they did a lot of the jobs that Americans didn't want to do. So a lot of times when you get people coming from these third world countries, not only are they not complaining, they're doing jobs that other Americans don't want to do. And for Donald Trump to talk about other people complaining is a bit rich since all Donald Trump does is act like the victim all the time. He's a Russian asset. I think he has something to do with Ivana's death. Oh, right. I didn't know. I don't know about that one. Yeah, but I think so. I think it's a bit rich. And I think that's the other thing that I was thinking about is that no group complains more, right, than MAGA. All Trump does is talk about how unfairly he's been treated. He's constantly saying, I'm unfairly treated. Everyone's after me. He's always, he tweeted out like 200 things, complaining about. All he does is complain. So when he says all Somalians do is complain, I'm like, no, he complains way more than anyone else. And the idea that this is the difference, right? Like you have that one Afghan person who shot two National Guards people, killing one of them. And then what he does is that he then says, well, basically they're all the same, right? Anytime that Trump doesn't like a group, whether it's people from Somalia or people from Haiti, that statement about complaining is a misogynist, narcissistic statement. Every bigot I've ever met uses that phrase. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right, Trish. Yeah, it is. It's one of those statements where, like, you know, like, what proof do you have they complained? Now, are you going to find a Somalian who complains? Of course you are. They're human beings. All human beings complain, right? But what they do is they lower the bar for people from Somalia and from Haiti, and they put the bar up from people who come from my country, Europe, Scandinavia. Often Trump will say we should invite more people from Denmark, Sweden, Australia, the UK. What's he saying there? Right? Why is he using my country as an example of a country that you want to immigrate to your country? Because Australia, even though it's very multicultural, it's still like a white, he considers Australia like a white country, right? The same with Europe, the same with Sweden, the same with Denmark. He wants people to come over from countries like my country who he considers white countries, right? And the other thing was, and the biggest example of that was when he said that he wanted Afrikaners, which are white people from South Africa, right? And he complains. He has the president he has the leader of South Africa come to the White House, and then he ambushes that leader and shows a video of what he thinks is white genocide in South Africa. Could you imagine him doing that to like a Russia? Like, could you imagine Donald Trump meeting with Putin, and then during the meeting showing a video of Russia and Putin bombing Ukraine? they would never do that. Like they would never embarrass um, Putin in that way. But when it came to Zelensky, they embarrassed him. When it came to the South African president, they embarrassed him. So he's always got this thing where, and he wants to invite. Not only is he very concerned about white South Africans, he wants to he wants to almost get rid of legal immigration. So he's limiting legal immigration to about 7,000 a year. So for a country the size of America, that is an insanely small amount of people. But he wants to give special rights or special conditions for white people from South Africa because he thinks there's a genocide going over there, right? There's a really strong pattern. They didn't do it to Mandami, though, did they? No, true. But Mandami Mandami is not from a. I think the reason he didn't do it to Mandami is because he's first of all he's a mayor from he's a mayor from New York. He's not from an overseas country, and I think Trump saw Mandami as similar to what he is. I think he was like he saw Mandami as the outsider who captured a whole bunch of people in America using cost of living, and so I think in some ways he sees being friends with Mandami. He's a white supremacist, exactly. Yeah, he sees being friends with Mandami as a bonus, as a plus, right? For him because he wants to run on that cost of living thing, and that's somewhere where Trump is currently not doing very well. And he thinks, well, Mandami is doing well with cost of living, or talking about it. Well, I'm going to hitch my tent with Mandami, and I think that's the reason he wants to do that. So yeah, but yeah, that's the reason why I think a lot of that stuff is happening with Trump. But the way he talks about black people is just so horrible. I just can't imagine a prime minister in my country ever talking about like, they can be hard on immigration. Like you could have a leader in America, in Australia, who's tough on immigration. I'm talking about like the prime minister, but they would never single out a group like Somalia or that type of group. Not the prime minister. And we have quite tough immigration laws in Australia. So again, I just find it like weird the way he can get away with talking about that stuff. It's just so horrible. I think a lot of part of it is he's throwing meat to his base. I noticed Nick Fuentes today. Um, it is horrible, Joe. It makes me sick. Nick Fuentes today, who's obviously that young online white supremacist, and what Nick Fuentes has been very critical of Trump because Nick Fuentes has often said Trump says a lot, but he doesn't do much. Like he will say something, but doesn't. But he was very impressed with what Trump said about Somalians today. He said, "Oh my God, this is fantastic what he's saying about Somalia." So I think part of this is Trump does believe this stuff, but I also think part of it is that there is something going on in the Republican, especially young Republicans, and a lot of them have gone, quite right wing, white nationalists, white Christian nationalists. They do they do the otherings when it helps them to divide people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. Like you look at Zora Mandami, right? That's a good point, right? He called Zora Mandami. He said he was going to bring in Sharia law. He said he was a communist. He was an Islamist, right? He did all that stuff with Zora Mandami. But then Zora Mandami comes in and he completely flips. So it's always hard to know with Trump how much of it is what he really thinks, which I do think he does think some of this stuff, and how much is it's a combination of, they not have Nazi problem. Yeah. How much is a combination of they know their base or their young people, right, are disappointed in Trump because they don't feel Trump did enough of what he said he was going to do. And so therefore he's trying to get those people back. Stephen Miller is running our country because he has dementia. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Stephen Miller is just one of the most horrible people I've ever sort of seen or experienced in a long time. So again, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that crazy stuff that we're seeing. That we're seeing online at the moment. And Kevin Sheeny, can't, yeah, MC, yeah, that's right, that's right, Kevin. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of that stuff is is basically Trump pandering to his base, trying to get back the Candace Owens type people, trying to get back um, the Tucker Carlson people, a lot of that people who turned against him. He wants to get those people back to create a sort of a vibe in his party. You've got Miller and Russell for pure evil, yeah, and you got Candace Owens at the moment, right? Candace Owens like has a massive, massive base, right? Like she has a massive supporter. And she's gone from like even with Charlie Kirk, right? Firstly, it was Israel killed Charlie Kirk. Then it was the French president killed or France killed Charlie Kirk, right? That's so it went from Israel to France, and now she's saying that it was actually people within Turning Point USA killed her, right? So she just keeps flipping all the time, and she's just completely now. It's hard to know how much of this is her being nuts or how much of this is just a grift, right? Because in the online space where Tucker Carlson lives and where Candace Owens lives and where Megyn Kelly lives, you're rewarded by the more nuttier you are. And then you have someone like Nick Fuentes, who was always far right. And then he jumps in, right? And now people in that space, right? People in that space will want to go as nutty as they can. They want to go to Nick Fuentes. So if they're hearing people like Megyn Kelly being a bit like, I don't know, you're going too far, they're going to go to who's ever the most extreme. So I feel like they're all competing with each other to see who's the most extreme out of the most of them because they know the one who acts the most extreme is going to get the most clicks and is going to get the most viewers. So then you have you have Tucker Carlson on Piers Morgan. He's using the F word, the derogatory word for gay people, right? Why is he doing that? Why does he keep saying that? He keeps saying, oh, F word, F word, F word. And he tries to get Piers Morgan to say it. Why? I think his engagement is trying to farm engagement. It's called engagement farming online because he wants to get those. They're all fighting for young men, right? They're all fighting to get the attention of young people who are online, who are conspiratorial, and they're all fighting for that base, right? And the only way you can get them is by being more crazy and more edgy than the other person. So that's what I think is going on online. And Joe, how big is Fuentes and the Groyper folks? They're pretty big. Now, if you look at Turning Point USA, right? So Turning Point USA had mostly young people in it. So it was mostly like a young people. They reckon between 30 and 40% of Turning Point young people are sympathetic to work towards Nick Fuentes. So that's a pretty big group. We saw those Republican leaks from the Young Republican Party where they're all making jokes about, they're all making jokes about Hitler, liking Hitler and all that stuff. A lot of those people were in Turning Point USA. So they actually have a significant following. And Charlie Kirk wasn't doing what they're doing. He didn't go to the same level as Nick Fuentes, but we do know that Nick Fuentes, that Charlie Kirk, and a lot of the people in the Republican Party were concerned about Nick Fuentes's rage bait, exactly, Trish. They were concerned about what Nick Fuentes' influence had amongst young people, right? Because a lot of these young people, to Charlie, they thought Charlie Kirk was a little bit too safe, right? So if you've got young people and you've got one person like Charlie Kirk who said, he said bad things, but he wasn't like Nick Fuentes, and then you have Nick Fuentes who says what they want to hear, they're going to go to Nick Fuentes, right? They'll go to Nick, and then that's why Tucker Carlson started losing some of his audience to Nick Fuentes because Tucker Carlson wasn't saying what Mark, whether they actually believe what they are saying or whether they're simply posturing, they all deserve a tragic wood. Yeah, exactly. Groyper's very scared. Yeah, exactly, Mark. at the end of the day, Mark, you're right. It doesn't really matter whether they believe it or not because they're still, they you know, they're still like encouraging this behavior. In my opinion, I think Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens don't really believe everything they're saying. I think they are just like engagement farming. But I do think Nick Fuentes believes what he's saying because Nick Fuentes has never changed, right? He's always been the same person. So there's no rule. So, but with Tucker, he's never been great, but he's gotten worse. With Candace, she's never been great, but she's gotten way worse. And it all happens when they left mainstream media where they're getting paid like a wage. So when you're like when you're with mainstream media, you get paid a wage. You get every week you get paid a wage. Online media is very different. You get paid depending on how many people subscribe to you and how many people are watching you. So now you have to get you have to get people viewing you, right? If you work at Fox News, that's up to the producers or that's up to Rupert Murdoch to just, to work out the viewers. It's not up to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson just has to come in every day and do his show. He doesn't have to concern himself with advertisers or how many people are watching him. But when you go independent and you go online, you're now consumed by how many people are my viewers going up or are my viewers going down, right? And so they become captured by the audience. Audience capture is a massive problem, right? Audience capture is where you get captured by your audience and you hear your audience talking back to you. So if you're Candace Owens and you do a story that sounds normal and your audiences are like this, you're like, well, they didn't like that. Now, if if you're Candace Owens and you start talking about Emmanuel Macron's wife being born a man, right? That gets boom, that goes all the way to the top. And they notice that they're like, oh, every time I do a story about Emmanuel Macron's wife being a man, just like what a ridiculous story, right? And she's obsessed with that story, right? But every time she did that story, millions of people watched her. A lot of people engaged with her, right? And the more normal you are online, the less viewers you get, the less engagement you get. So your reward, or you as a human being, not saying all human beings, but as someone who wants to survive online and get an audience, the algorithms will push you towards doing more extremist things. And then you become captured by your audience. They're obsessed with what their audiences are saying, right? If their audiences want more Emmanuel Macron's wife is a man, they'll give them that, right? So that's audience capture is a really big problem online. And you see less of it in mainstream media. And the reason you see less of it in mainstream media is because what I said before is that you're not as connected to the revenue stream. You have bosses or salespeople who do the advertising, right? You just get a wage. You come in, you do your stories, and you get a wage. You don't have to get involved in everything else. So in a way, mainstream media is more protected from audience capture than online media, where people just want to tell you what you want to say, right? And that can sometimes happen on the left as well. You can get left-wing content creators just telling their audience what they want to hear. Like you might want to hear, like, if I came on here and I told you that, Donald Trump was molesting 20 children a day, right? Now, I don't believe that, but if I said that to you and suddenly my viewers went through the roof because I thought a left-wing audience would like to hear that, they might go, you know what? I might do a few more of those ones. And so then you just give your audience what they want to hear, right? And then you do a story. You do a story that your audience doesn't like. And then you go down. You go, I'm not going to do any. I want to give you an example. There's a guy called Jimmy Dore. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jimmy Dore. He's a YouTuber and he's a friend of Joe Rogan's, right? And he used to be very left. He used to be a Bernie Sanders supporter, right? And Jimmy Dore became, during COVID, did a video that was pro-vaccines, right? He said, all those people saying the COVID vaccines are bad, they're idiots. So what happened to him? okay, because he had like an anti-establishment audience, like a populist audience, right? Who were they were very anti-establishment. A lot of them had a little bit of the left, but they also had a bit of the right, right? So he cultivated like a populist, outsider type audience. So what happened is when he made that video, the YouTube video, he got absolutely destroyed by his audience. He lost, I think, 70% of his subscribers. Um, he basically, if he would have continued on like that, he would have been like making almost no money. So what does he do? Now, he could have come back and doubled down and said, well, I don't care. I don't care what you say. This is what I think. I think the vaccines are good. But he didn't do that. Instead, he came back 1 week later and did an anti-vax video and an apology video. He said, I'd like to apologize because since my video last week, I've done some more research and now I realize that the vaccines are actually bad for you. And he completely flipped in 1 week. All his audience came back, right? All his audience came back. And this is where it gets even worse. He could have just left it there, right? And just gone on to talk about something else. But he didn't. He became one of the biggest anti-vaxxers on YouTube. Every week he would talk about how bad the vaccines were. It was insane. He became like, vaccines are bad. Then he started talking about how ivermectin was good. Why was he doing this? He was doing this because he'd been captured by his audience, right? His audience, he said something that he believed. He almost got destroyed by his audience, and then he completely flipped, right, to do that. Now, this is a problem with the online space in general, right? As much as I love online media, and look, I'm saying this as someone who's online, right? So I'm saying it against my own people, right? So, but I think it's important to be honest about these things. I think it's important to be honest about what happens online sometimes, because I don't think a lot of people online talk about it because they might be affected and might be affecting them themselves. So often you'll hear online people never discuss this because they don't want other people knowing about it because it could affect them. And I think it's important for people to know that doesn't mean that everybody online is a grifter. It doesn't mean everyone online is not telling the truth, but it is a problem, right? Because when you think about the business model online, it's not as independent as people make it out to be. Now, a lot of people online will, and I agree with this, will say, you can't trust mainstream media, right? You can't trust mainstream media because of advertisers, because advertisers are telling them what to do. And then you'll hear people online say, I'm immune from that because I only get all my money from subscribers. And a lot of people online will go, oh, actually, he's independent because he's only getting his money from subscribers. Now, on the surface of that, it sounds like he's better. It sounds like he's better than the mainstream media guy. But think about this. The mainstream media guy doesn't worry about the advertisers. That's his boss. That's his boss's problem. There is a separation between, now they can lose their job. That's true. If they say something wrong. So there is something, mainstream media is not perfect. Their boss, that's the thing with these people. They don't hold hard, fast, dirty values. They flip with whatever brings them clicks. How can anyone trust? Yeah, exactly, Trish. They do. They just flip. And the thing is just because the money that you're getting is coming from subscribers, that doesn't mean you're independent. That could mean that that could also mean that, wait a second, if all that person's money is coming from if all my money to survive, to pay my mortgage, right, to pay my rent, to pay my everything, if that was only coming from people who subscribe to me, then I would be a little bit worried about what I say next, right? Because what if I say something that annoys the people? What if I say something because not everyone thinks the same. Not everybody on the left thinks the same. Not everybody on the right thinks the same. There will be things I say that you would disagree with, right? That is just normal. But if I then start thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to say that because I'm worried that people on my side might not subscribe to me, and then I can't pay my mortgage, right? That stuff does happen, right? you have to be very careful. So I'm always careful about whether it's someone from the left or from the right who just constantly just says the same thing over and over again, because that's the thing. Like, I'm not, and I'm not criticizing anyone in particular and things like that, but I think, you know, I think audience capture is a bigger problem than people realize. And that's why we're seeing so much of this nutty stuff. Now, most of it is happening on the right. This stuff with Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, a lot of these online people with influencers and stuff like that, so much of this being driven by how much they just want to give. The algorithms have made online media, right, make you just not not say what you think, right? Not say what you actually think. So I think from that point of view, it is something that online media should talk about more. They should discuss more. They should think about more, and other online people should talk about it as well, and not pretend like, because the other thing is it could be a spectrum, right? You could have people who are full blown grifters because they want to tell you what you hear, but then there could be other people who are like, you know what, I do criticize my own side from time to time, but I'm going to do it. Like, it can just change your behavior a little bit. You know what I mean? Or it can change your behavior a lot. You can have someone like Jimmy Dore who goes full blown grifter, or you can have someone who's a little bit, maybe on the other side. So it could be like a spectrum of how affectionate. But yeah, I think that's the reason why we're seeing so much nuttiness online at the moment, because a lot of people are vying for the attention of young people. This is the other thing I want to talk about, right? Is like, you have people like Piers Morgan, like Tucker. I agree, should be discussed more. Thank you for doing. That's all right. Yeah, yeah. I think Republicans won Tennessee. Oh, really? Oh, wow. But Kimmy, did they win by a lot? I wonder how much they won by. Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, yeah. I look, and Kimmy, it doesn't surprise me that they won. It doesn't surprise me they won, but I was always expecting them to win. Yeah, I know, Marty. But you know what? If they only won by a small margin, that's pretty good. I think it was close. Perfect. Yeah. You know what? It's still a win. It's still kind of a win if they only won by a couple of points. About 78 points as of a few minutes ago. I know. Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah. And look, again, I was expecting the Democrats to lose because the margin was so big. 7, 8, not 7 to 8. Okay, that's close. That's very, very close. Yeah, that's very close. So yeah, that's still, in my opinion, I still think that's a really good win. Donna, don't cry, Donna. Yes, but it's like a small margin. I think it went from to 7. Yeah. That's like less than, like a quarter of what it was. Exactly. Trish, exactly. That's still a pretty good win for Democrats. And the Republicans, they'd be concerned about that, because going into the midterms, right? Going into the midterms, that sort of swing to to Democrats would be massive, right? It would be massive. So I think you got to take it. I think you got to take it as a win. Um, that's with 75% of the vote counted. Yeah, they need to challenge it in every race. School board, dog catcher, yeah, exactly. Yeah, 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 exactly. And so I agree with you. Yeah, I think it's still a pretty good win for the Democrats, even though they lost. Because no one was really expecting. I feel like crying to. I let my hopes get too high. Yeah, Marnie, I got to say, I never thought it was going to be a very good chance of a win. I just think that when you're talking about those, when the margin's like 10 or under 10, but when it's like 22, I think that's too much. Trish, absolutely every rate, yeah. So I think it's good, but I think out of this, Democrats are going to come out feeling better. And out of this, the Republicans are going to be really worried, because that's a significant difference in margin of a win. So, and this is the thing, like going into the midterms, you want to see all these special elections going this way. A lot of the special elections we saw in Virginia, New York, New Jersey, obviously in those areas they're more democratic. But yeah, The R's are entirely too comfortable and needs challenge. So they remember they were, yeah. And look, Trish, think about this. They actually, the Republicans spent a lot of money, um, a lot of money going down there to try to win, and a lot of resources to try to win. So the fact that they had to move so much of the resources that for a win, that's good. Yeah. Republicans are a stubborn branch. Wait until they pay their first healthcare premium January. Yeah, yeah. 10 race is also one of the skewed up gerrymandering. Just yeah. Well, the interesting thing about the gerrymandering thing, Trish, is that if a lot of the because so many Latinos have gone back to the Democrats, uh, actually, a lot of the gerrymandering in Texas might not even work, right? Because they were basing the gerrymandering on a lot of Latinos still being supporting Trump. Now, because of the way they've redrawn the districts, but because so many Latinos have gone back to the Democrats, even with the redistricting, it doesn't look like they're going to pick up, they might not pick up any seats or very few seats. So it's kind of bit them, yeah, it's kind of not worked out for them in the long run to do it. So, and of course, in California, they're going to pick up five. I think we're in a crisis because the Supreme Court and Congress is allowing all this lawlessness. Yeah, right. I did say that they may have screwed themselves. Yeah, exactly. I had a look at the maps, Trish, in Texas, and and that was based. So all the gerrymandering that was done in Texas was all based on Latinos voting close to how they did in 2024. But because they've flipped so much back to the Democrats, it looks like they're not going to pick up any seats, even with the redistricting of the maps. Now, so I think that once if Democrats are winning by 10 or something like that, a lot of the redistricting might not work. Yeah. Um, because you can't first of all, you can't redistrict based on race. That's the only thing the Supreme Court said. So they can't redistrict based on race. So I think the Democrats might actually come out a little bit stronger in the redistrict. Now I've got to say, as an Aussie, this whole gerrymandering thing is crazy, right? In Australia, and I'm sure the Democrats want this as well. I'm pretty sure the Democrats put this in power. In Australia, we have a independent commission that does all redistricting. So because we have to do redistricting in Australia as well, because you get extra population coming in from overseas, you get more migration, you get people moving. So you do have to like change the maps a bit. We do it like I think we do it every 5 or 10 years. I can't remember, but we have a independent commission who does it. So there is no, so the left wing party or the right wing party have no say in any of the new maps at all, anywhere in Australia. And that is just such a crazy thing. Donna, yeah, that's just such a crazy thing for me to watch people be able to gerrymander and redistrict like that. Because in Australia, we make a big deal about having an independent commission who doesn't allow any of that. So and we also have in Australia, I've said this before, we have compulsory voting. Now, I know a lot of libertarians don't like compulsory voting, but I do think compulsory voting is actually a positive thing. It's not like you're going to go to jail if you don't vote. You get like a $20 fine, or, you can get out of it by sending an email and saying you're sick. So it's not a big deal, but it does create a culture where everybody votes. And what they find is the more people that vote, they're less likely to have someone like Donald Trump win the election, right? There's a big connection because what happens is Trump, people like Trump are able to win when they bring out their base in big numbers. But when a country has compulsory voting, a lot of the people that don't vote in America are people in the middle. So they're either centre left, centrist, or centre right. They seem to be a lot of the people that don't vote. So if you force those people to come out to vote, someone like Trump probably wouldn't be elected because they would probably go, you know what? As the Democrats have tried to pass a bill to make every state have independent commissions to redraw maps and get rid of gerrymandering, but the Republicans always block it. Yeah, I did say that, PJ. I did say that. Yeah, yeah, I know. And it's the thing with Australia is, I think the difference is because I did look at how gerrymandering has been going on since like the War of Independence. Um, as we're in Australia, the Independent Commission was there from the start, right? So that's the difference. Like it's easier for us because the Independent Commission was created when Australia was, before Australia was colonized by the British, but after the British came here and they brought in voting, that was there from the start. So it's much harder in America when you have that there from the start and then you try to get rid of it, right? Than if it was there from the very start. So it's a much more difficult situation for you because had Australia had similar things to America, it then becomes very hard to get rid of it because then you got to go, well, who's going to be the independent commission? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? So I get it. I get why it's harder in America to get rid of gerrymandering and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Hi, hey, Joe from Sydney, Australia. Oh, hi, Lucid Hex. Oh, another Aussie. Wow. I think, thank you. I didn't realize you're from Australia. G'day. G'day, Lucid. I'm actually also originally from Sydney, but I live in Brisbane. So yeah, so it's nice to see old Sydney cider here. Thank you. So I basically I think a lot of people. G'day, mate. G'day. G'day. Yeah, yeah. And Lucid Hex. Just before we go on, I just want to say I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Dancing with the Stars, but our Robert Irwin, son of Steve Irwin, won the Dancing with the Stars. So go. I've done a few years in Darwin also. Oh, excellent. Yeah, yeah. Good old Darwin. I've been there. Good place. I'm in Brisbane now, which is very sunny. It's a little bit different to Sydney, a little bit quieter, but yeah, it's nice lifestyle up here. Um, but yeah, yeah. As I said before, I think that the big difference I think he did, bless him. Yeah, Riveter. Yeah, yeah. I know. And love Brizzy. And the other thing is about Robert Irwin winning America's um, Dancing with the Stars is that American news didn't really talk about it that much, which to me was upsetting. Um, to say that, hey Joe, check out my poems one day, and you guys too. Oh, cool. I will check those poems out. Yeah, yeah. I love poetry. It's great. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, we'll definitely all have a look at that. Maybe next time we can read your poems online. We can open them up, have a read of them. That would be great. Yeah, to do that one day. Um, but yeah, so what was I saying? But yeah, I think the big difference between Australia and America when it comes to politics is that I feel like we have very boring politics here. Like you guys have way more exciting politics over there. And that's probably the reason why people like me and Mary and the Lucid Hex get so involved in American politics is because it's like a reality TV show. You know what I mean? And in Australia, our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who I actually voted for, and he's a great guy, but he's very boring. Um, so I think for that reasons, Americans love the Irwins. Thank you, Marty. Thank you so much. It's nice to hear you talk about the Irwins that way. Um, the media tried to hide it that we won. I'm only joking. I'm only joking. I'm sure they didn't hide it on purpose, but you know that's not the only Irwin who won, is it? Um, his sister Bindi Irwin had won 10 years earlier. So I understand why they would make America mad, make them angry because we got two Aussies who've won America's thing. Although, in saying that, I think there was an American who won Australia's Dancing with the Stars. So, and by the way, I'm not a big reality TV star, so I'm not. I won't go into it too much. Boring is better than a felon. That's true, Donna. Boring is better than a felon. I would much rather have the politics that we have in Australia than the politics you have in America. But from a point of view of watching something, America to me is like watching a car wreck, and you can't keep your eyes off it. But the thing about it is as 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 an Australian who comments on American politics, it's amazing how much as soon as an Australian or someone from Europe or England comments on American politics, how much MAGA? GN, I've got to go. Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. The thing about it is, I wish I was boring again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, the thing about it is that it's hard for us to keep our eyes off American politics. It really is hard for us to keep it. And so when people say, Joe, mind your own business. You're not American. Worry about your own country, all that sort of, 'cause we get that a lot when you comment on American politics. Why don't you worry about your own country? Well, you know, it's you can't do this batshit crazy stuff and then we don't watch. I love when any American says mind your own business, like it doesn't hurt us. Exactly. Exactly. Australia, the thing is, America has the most powerful military on the planet. It's put tariffs on us. It put tariffs on the rest of the world. Um, the reserve currency is US. Exactly. Um, you know, they're talking about invading Greenland. They talk about invading. They want to invade Venezuela. They want to annex Canada, and they do all these crazy stuff. And then it's like, mind your own business if you comment on it. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like what happens in America affects the rest of the world. And then you add to that the batshit crazy stuff that he says and does. Like, we are only human, right? We are only human beings. Like, if someone was walking through the CBD of Brisbane completely naked and someone got angry at me and said, Joe, why are you looking at that naked person walking down the street of the city? Like, I would be like, well, everyone's looking at that person because, like, there's someone, like, walking down the street naked and so it's impossible for us to keep our eyes away. I will never forget when Donald Trump and RFK Jr. held a press conference, to tell the world, right? This was shown in Australia, to show the world that Tylenol, which we call Panadol in Australia, was causing autism in people, right? Without any shred of evidence whatsoever. Then it gets even more hilarious is then that Donald Trump says, well, did you know that in Cuba there's no autism? And the reason there's no autism in Cuba is because they don't have Tylenol. So when you have people like Trump or RFK Jr. saying the most batshit crazy things on national TV, you can't ask us not to look, right? ASD mum here, ASD level 3, nonverbal child. Yeah, exactly, Lucid. Yeah, exactly. And also the other thing, Lucid, is that um, they treat people with autism like it's this disgusting thing that needs to get rid of. You know what I mean? And could you imagine all those people, all those parents who've got children with autism or people who are autistic, and all those people watching that and being told that it's like they have cancer. They're being spoken to like they have cancer, like we need to eradicate this. And they will talk about it like they can't function. So when they talk about autism, they always talk about the most extreme element. I think in my head, right, that people like Donald Trump and RFK Jr., when they think of autism, they think of the Dustin Hoffman character, right, in that movie, right? And it's so no good countries can trust us with current regime. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So they always think of the most extreme version of autism, right? Most people who have autism actually have Asperger's, which up until like 20 or 30 years ago, people didn't even like talk about as autism. So when people like RFK Jr. and Donald Trump goes, we've never had so many people with autism before, they don't seem to understand that the way that back in the day in the 60s and 70s, school teachers, parents, they weren't looking to diagnose kids with autism in schools and people like that. They weren't equipped with it. They were just called eccentric. People would just go, oh, my son is eccentric. My daughter is eccentric, right? They weren't diagnosing it. then what happened in the 90s and 2000s is schools started looking out for children who might have autism. And so, of course, the numbers went up because they were diagnosing more people. And then they added Asperger's, which is like, which is like a lot of people with Asperger's. I know people with Asperger's, and I would have no idea. Like, I know a female, especially females who are better with communication. I would have no idea. Like, a friend of mine who I've known for years told me that she has Asperger's. I could never have guessed that, right? So again, the Trump, the constant lies. There are brilliant autistic people who can maintain safe, so lies. There are also people like my son, you require 24/7 care for entire life. Both people are level 3 ASD. Yeah, exactly. Listen, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the way for me, it's the way they talk about people with autism. It's just so derogatory, and it doesn't give them any, like, it's like so yeah. So watching that press conference, the way they talk about stuff like that. Now, now the other thing is talking about minding your own business if you're from another country is America. Maybe people in America don't know this, but a lot of people these days, well, you would know this, they don't follow news. They don't go home at 6 o'clock and watch their news. They get their news online. So if you're an Australian person and you're on TikTok getting your news from TikTok or online, you're getting a lot of American news because because American news is so batshit crazy. The algorithm sends you a lot of American stuff, right? So you get a lot of American news. So a lot of people, right? A lot of people would have in Australia, the UK, Europe would have seen RFK Jr. and Trump saying, "Don't take Tylenol," right? Because it could cause autism. So again, don't tell us to mind our own business when you have the person of the most powerful country on the planet who all the media carries. They all talk about in Australia, Europe, and there will be people in Australia who will be sympathetic to that sort of idea. And they might hear someone like, and by the way, I want to be very fair with this, right? I'm someone who grew up in a place called Newtown, Erskineville, Newtown in Sydney, which is like very inner city, which is like, so I spent most of my life in inner city Newtown. I was around a lot of people who were into alternative medicines and all that, and they weren't necessarily right wing, right? But they can be a little bit hesitant, dictating our health. Exactly, they can be a little bit hesitant about vaccines, especially people in the alternative medicine area. And so, a lot of these people would have seen RFK Jr. saying, "Don't take Tylenol" in Australia, and they would have gone, yes, actually, you know what? Maybe I won't. Or this is the worst part, is the people who are 50-50. The people who are like, I'm concerned for my child, and fair enough. Of course, if you're a new mother, and I have sympathy for these people, I'm not going to call them crazy. I'm not going to call them stupid because I know these people, right? And they will have genuine concern for their child. They're not very political, right? They're probably not that well educated. I'm not saying they're dumb, but not that well educated. And they have a new child and they're concerned. Maybe they read something on Facebook, right? Maybe someone says it, and maybe they don't even believe it, but maybe they're like, I'm conflicted. I don't know whether I should believe some random person on Facebook with who no one's ever heard of, which is crazy to me, but hey, or should I believe my doctor? MAGA doesn't need to tell other countries to mind their own business where their idols can't keep. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Thanks, Trish. So that sort of thing can influence people, right, in other countries like myself, because the United States gets a lot of coverage in other countries. So I do worry about those young mothers who were maybe 50-50, and then Trump, it gets even worse. Then Trump says, with a lot of the vaccines, he says, spread them out over 3 years, right? So he's giving medical advice. Donald Trump, who was a reality TV star, right, who started up a fake university called Trump University, wasn't actually a real university, who says magnets die when they touch water, right, who thinks asylum seekers are people who've been let out of actual asylums, like crazy asylum seekers, um, who who thinks you can bring down medicines by 2,000%. This person is giving medical advice on national TV to the whole world and saying, you should, you should spread out your vaccines for your children over 3 years because too much vaccines at the same time can overrun your child's immune system. Now, yeah, just had an MRI dementia, exactly. So what's happening here is you will have a lot of mothers who are scared, and he's saying like, oh, he's saying maybe I should spread out my vaccines over 3 years. Now, again, this is like, yeah, a lot of people are informed. They aren't taught critical thinking. My late mother-in-law spent a lot of, yes, I'm lung. She was permanently disabled by polio. Exactly. And that's exactly right, Trish, because a lot of people now, we don't see people with polio. We don't see people with rubella. You know, that I have really hard time empathy for anti-vax people. I had polio as an infant. Oh, right. Had a weakened right arm and left arm for the rest of my life. Had orthopedic surgery every dang summer. Oh, okay. Yeah. 100%. PJ, I totally understand why you would not have. Yeah. 100% I understand that. Yeah. Um, I do think that evidence does show, and I'm not saying for you, PJ, that with people who are 50-50 or people who are a bit hesitant because they're not that well educated, is the best way to bring those people in is through education and not through calling them stupid. Even though personally I think they're stupid, right? Even though in my head I might actually say that. I think statistically speaking, you're better to bring those people in because they're not the hardcore anti-vaxxers, right? I'm not talking about the hardcore, but the problem is that if you spread vaccines over three years, in that 3 year period, the ones that you didn't get, you might get, and you can get and then spread to other people. So that's why you should have the vaccines at the same time. And I'm not saying this, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a doctor. I did watch 10 seasons of ER, right? I have seen a lot of ER. So I don't know if that gives me a qualification to be a doctor, but I did see an episode on ER about vaccines. So I think in America, where everything's about, TV and everything, in America, that should actually give me, I'm 75 now. I became and worked hard at that for 42 years. Oh, registered nurse. Okay, yeah. Yes, she couldn't use her right arm at all, and her right side weakened lungs. Oh, great. Yeah. See, yeah, that's terrible. Yeah, that's really terrible. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like I have, the thing is, I do know because coming from the inner suburbs and growing up in places where, unfortunately, people do believe this sort of stuff. I have known people who I couldn't have been convinced to get their children vaccinated, and they ended up not even being able to go to the school. And they ended up getting their children vaccinated later because in Australia, you can't go to a public school unless your children are vaccinated. So they only did it because they were forced to do it because they couldn't get the kids into school otherwise. So yeah, but the idea that and this is the big issue for me is that worries me about America is that I feel like Trumpism can leak into other countries and make other Western countries crazy, a little bit crazy as well. So that always concerns me as well. I don't know, I don't think in Australia we have a party called One Nation, which is a little bit Trumpy like, but they only get 10% of the vote. So again, I don't think they're that important in Australia. But at the same time, I do feel like, I would like to see MAGA completely defeated, completely gone, because, well, that's the way it was here too. But the anti-vaxxers are working on dismantling that as well. Yeah. Unfortunately, the only thing that's going to stop the anti-vaxxers is more deaths and more people getting sick. When they start seeing that, which I hope doesn't happen, which I think is already happening, hi hippy dippy. I think if that starts happening, I think you're going to see the anti-vax thing go out the window. I also think Donald Trump, if he starts seeing RFK Jr. is 100% anti-vax, I think Donald Trump Jr. is like 70% there. But Donald Trump Jr. will flip, right? He will flip if he starts seeing people dying and he thinks it affects him. Yeah. We didn't used to think his fringe here was a big deal in the beginning either. Stompton. Yeah, exactly. That's what worries me, Trish. I saw a lot of stuff with Trump was like Trump will never get elected, right? RFK Jr. is too crazy. right? All this sort of stuff. So I saw a lot of that in America, and I thought, well, okay, now I agree with you. Measles already making a resurgence here in the US. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Make American measles get. It's just so bad, and that's what worries me about other countries like Australia. His sons are so dumb. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but so that's the thing. Like that worries me about Australia is that it happened in America. A lot of people in America didn't think Trump would actually get elected. They didn't think people like RFK Jr. would ever be like the health secretary. I mean, honestly. So the other day, RFK Jr. put into the CDC that they haven't ruled out that vaccines don't cause uh, autism, right? So he put that's now on the CDC. And the interesting thing about that is true, that technically speaking, they haven't ruled out that vaccines, because, yes, whether the children start dying or being permanently handicapped by polio, then they'll change their minds. We've already had 3 or 4 dies. Exactly, PJ. Yeah, yeah. But the interesting thing about the way RFK Jr. plays with words is he tries to take a little bit of truth. Like he'll take like so many diseases, but they're not letting them into bird flu. Yeah, that he will take a little bit of truth. Trump will take a little bit of truth, or RFK Jr. Right, and then they will take it out of context. And they do this with vaccines and autism. They will talk about a study that happened in '96, and the study was debunked. Right, it was an English study. It was like 30 people. It was debunked, and so they constantly talk about that study. Or they will say that they haven't completely ruled out that autism isn't caused by vaccines. Now, technically speaking, that's true, but it's not really true. What they It's very hard to prove a negative, right? So that's like me saying they can't rule out that Coca-Cola doesn't cause autism. Now, they can't rule that out. They can't rule out that eating meat doesn't cause autism. They can't rule out, all these things. They know it doesn't, but they can't rule it out. There's two different things, right? And so they will take that as a reason. Now, when RFK Jr. puts on their CDC website that particular thing, what he's leaving out is they haven't ruled out Coca-Cola, anything else, because it's hard, you can't rule that stuff out. So they're playing with words, they're playing with, things that they can't do, right? And so it's not that it causes it or that, it's that it's very hard to prove a negative. So if they're going to do that on the CDC, right, they should put, in reality, they should put, well, we haven't worked out that anything can't cause autism, because that would be the actual thing. That would be the reality of what's happening. Yeah, they should put Coca-Cola, Fanta, cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever. So again, he's just constantly mixing words together, lying to people, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that the other thing I want to talk about is I want to go back to the cabinet meeting, is the strikes in the boat strikes in off the coast of Venezuela. And I want to talk about this for a reason. During the cabinet meeting and during the last 24 hours, all I've heard is that the second strike was illegal, right? And I've heard Donald Trump saying he would have preferred there wasn't a second strike. I've heard Pete Hegseth throw his admiral under the bus. By the way, the tweet from Pete Hegseth yesterday was just like hilarious. Like it was so bad, it was hilarious. The tweet, when you read it, is like he's trying to defend his admiral, except the bit that people didn't realize, well, most of MAGA didn't realize, is the bit where he said, yeah, it was his decision. So in the tweet of, I respect this admiral, I think this guy is fantastic, I think this guy is a great admiral, I agree with everything he says and all that sort of stuff, it was his decision, right? So he basically, he's saying comment, he threw him under the bus, right? And then, of course, Trump has thrown Hegseth under the bus. So Trump throws Hegseth under the bus, Hegseth throws his admiral under the bus. Who knows? His admiral might throw someone else under the bus, and it might end up being some private, who ends up getting the thing for it. So the crazy thing about it for me is how much of the emphasis has been about the second strike. Because when you think about it, the emphasis should be on the first strike. I mean, what's the difference between the first and the second strike? I get from a legal point of view, maybe, but I don't see a major difference, right? The first strike was supposed to kill them. So it wasn't like the first strike was meant to hurt, it was meant to blow up the boat, but not hurt the people. Um, yeah, the underside of that bus getting really crowded. Yeah. So, so, so the first strike was meant to kill them. It didn't kill them. They get thrown off the boat. They're still alive, and then they throw another one in and then kill them. Like, I get that it's bad, but I think the first one was just as bad. So I don't understand the one is okay. Oh yes, they're throwing Admiral Bailey under the bus. The first strike was illegal as hell. It was murder. Yeah, exactly, PJ. This is what I don't understand. Why they're so scared about the second strike, right? They're really concerned about the second strike, but they're already said they want to kill the people on the boat. To me, it's semantics, right? I think it's semantics whether they kill them with the first strike or the second strike, because the end goal was they wanted to kill them. So I just feel like I don't understand the obsession. They executed these three strikes without evidence. If they had credible evidence, yeah, exactly. They're killing people without any evidence, right? That they did anything wrong. They're killing people who a lot of people, by the way, a lot of people like Rand Paul, who voted for Trump. Rand Paul is not a Democrat, voted for Trump, has come out and basically said that a lot of these boats would not have been on their way to America. They would have been on their way to another island, right? And they wouldn't, and a lot of these boats had like 10 people on them. And they don't usually, boats carrying that much drugs don't usually have that many people because they want room for more drugs on their boats. So first of all, even if they were drug smugglers, you can't just kill drug smugglers, right? And they call them narco terrorists. So they're trying to connect them as being terrorists. Now, this is where the war in Iraq, right, and the war on terrorism is this is the natural progression of the war in Iraq and the war on terror, right? Because the war in Iraq created a situation, right, where people lied about why they're going into Iraq, about WMDs, about they were terrorists. That you remember that Iraq was connected to Osama bin Laden, right? Remember that? We need to go into Iraq. Others are coming out about it now. They would have, yeah. So we have to go into Iraq because they're connected to Al Qaeda. So we've seen this before, right? We've seen this before with the war in Iraq. Then after that, or before then, they brought in rules that you can go after terrorists in other countries, right? So now the natural progression of that is Trump is using those laws that were brought in for terrorism, and he's using them against what he's alleging are actual like drug smugglers. And that's why he calls them narco terrorists, right? Because he needs to connect them to terrorism. Because under terrorism laws, you can do stuff. Maybe, yes, it's because it knows weapons of mass destruction. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's basically taking drugs of the UNW. Yeah, exactly, Trish. Yeah, they are. And yeah, drugs of the UNWMDs and drug traffickers are basically the new terrorists, the new Al Qaeda, right? The new Taliban, right? That's how it works now. They're just basically connecting it over. So, and that's why Trump will always say every boat's going to kill 25,000 people. Right, that guy's saying bring over 400 tons of cocaine. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're using, and the thing about the war on terror is that there were drone strikes, even by Obama, who did kill civilians. That's actually true. He did do drone strikes that killed civilians, right? But they had to go through more legal processes to get that okay, right? They weren't hiding behind a new thing. They were basing it on terrorism. Under Trump, he's taking laws that were never supposed to be about drug traffickers, and he's trying to put it into that, right? So he's connecting the two together, and then it gets even worse because in Venezuela, apparently he's going into Venezuela because Maduro is connected to drug cartels, but at the same time, he wants to pardon the president of Honduras, right? Who was convicted in America of smuggling cocaine into the United States. Like, I think there's a little bit of a contradiction there. And this is what I mean by nobody treats the people of the United States like idiots more than Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump treats people like absolute idiots, right? At the very same time that he's pardoning the ex-president of Honduras, a drug trafficker, he's going after a Venezuelan president over drug trafficking. Pardons one, bombs the other. Yeah. So again, you have to ask the difference between Trump and George W. Bush is that George W. Bush tried harder. In some ways, George W. Bush respected Americans more than Trump does, because George W. Bush got you know got you know got went to he tried to provide evidence, right? He tried to provide evidence. He went to United Nations. He said, "Here's all the evidence that we have. We have all these cylons coming through." He went through this whole thing to convince the world that they had weapons of mass destruction, right? Trump doesn't do any of that. Trump doesn't even pretend to do any of that. He will literally, within 2 sentences, say, "We need to go into Venezuela because of connection to drug cartels." And the very next sentence talk about, "I'm going to pardon the ex-president of Honduras," and not even wait a day or two between those two contradictions. That's how much he hates the American, or disrespects the American. Well, more so his base. Nobody hates their base more than Trump, right? He tried to make it look legit. The regime just thinks like, yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of MAGA actually believes that this is all about drugs. I don't know. I think a lot of them do believe it's about drugs. I mean, I don't know how a lot of them will say things like, with the ex-president of Honduras, they will say things like, they will just repeat what Trump says, which is he was convicted under Joe Biden. It was Joe Biden's fault. It was false, all this sort of stuff. Now, the thing about Honduras is that they just had elections, right, a day ago, and I don't think we still have the results yet because it was really close. And so Trump tweets out, right? He gets involved in that country's elections. Now, he has one particular candidate that he likes, right? So before the election, he tweets out that if he doesn't win, America's not going to help that country economically, right? So that's election interference, telling a country that unless you vote for my candidate, they won't get American support. Now, again, from someone who gets told to mind their own business all the time, there is American president trying to tell the people of Honduras how to vote, right? And threatening them with take economic, devastation. I don't think many of them do, and they do want war, and they know, yeah, exactly. I agree with you, Trish. I think a lot of them, I think if you scratch the surface of MAGA, of the MAG individual, there's a diehard neocon underneath there, dying to come out. Yeah. all the anti-war stuff, all the, joke, Trump is a peace guy. That's all such BS. But Trump was never about peace. He makes up lies about stopping wars in countries that he doesn't even know how to pronounce. He said two of the countries that he stopped the war of, the two of the countries that he said they're not even next to each other. He has no idea. So he's not, he just lies. Between 2016, 2020, he was shooting off drone strikes into Yemen. He bombed Syria. This is not an anti-war person, right? Joe Biden started no new wars, right? No new wars at all. And this is the other thing that Trump will say. Trump will say the war in Ukraine and Russia would never have happened if he was president because Putin is too scared of Trump, right? If that's the case, why did Russia increase their attacks on Ukraine after Trump was elected? So once Trump got elected, Russia increased its strikes by by a lot. The opposite would be true. Dave, California, how many Americans did that drug trafficker kill? How many more would kill now that Trump pardoned him? Exactly. It's like the terrorists on the Penguin Islands. That's right. Yeah. Trish, I'm still very upset about the tariffs on our islands, like one of the islands of Australia, which is one of our territories. Trump will put tariffs on there, and there's only penguins. All I can say is that the actual penguins on those islands, they still have not forgiven Trump for those tariffs. They're really upset about it. So exactly, and that's the thing with this whole thing is that so many of Trump's lies about he's managed to convince poor penguins. Yeah, people don't realize how much that stigmatized the penguins of that country. You know, um, they suffered a lot of economic damage because of what Trump did. He is a Russian asset. Yeah, no, they're pissed. I don't blame it. Really angry. Yeah, it's just that a lot of penguins don't talk. But yeah, we know. I'm upset about the penguins getting tariffed either. Yeah, exactly. It was a horrible thing, and the Penguin Association came out with a strong worded statement about how they felt about Trump and his tariffs. And I can tell you, if there's any penguins in America, they would not be voting for Donald Trump anywhere in the world. Actually, it's disgusting. He goes, and I don't think Trump is an animal lover. He never has dogs. I mean, you don't have to have dogs, but he's one of the only presidents who never has dogs around him. I think he should go there. Have you ever seen a penguin teeth? Yeah, I have seen penguin teeth. Yeah, we've got a lot of penguins in Australia. There's a lot of them around. Um, yeah, penguins teeth. Yeah, they're beautiful. They're beautiful little animals. There's a place in Tasmania, which is a place in Australia, and they have the tiny penguins, the little baby penguins. I think they're called fairy penguins, and they come out at like 5 in the morning. And if you go out there at 5 in the morning, you can watch thousands of them just go towards the water. And I watched it once in Tasmania. It was the most amazing things. I just flip them. Never trust anyone who doesn't like animals. Exactly. I agree. Yeah. And people in his administration, like they shot dogs, and like his son, his coke addict son, Don Jr., was going to Africa to kill like animals, like wildlife animals for the thrill of it. It's just it's a horrible family. They're just yeah, he's definitely not animal lover. And Kristen Noem just shoot her unruly puppy. Yeah, exactly. Just because her puppy was like playing up, then you know what? If you don't want to have it anymore, fine, that's fine. Like adopt it out to someone else. You don't have to kill it. You can just adopt it out to someone else, you know. But the idea and not only that, she seemed like she wrote it like it was no big deal, right? And like I'm an owner of a small dog. I don't live on a farm like she does. But Nibbles, my dog, who is half Chihuahua, half Maltese, when she found out about this, I can tell you, she wasn't happy about it. Yes, that's so horrible, cowardly. His sons, psychopaths. Yeah, they are. They are psychopaths. They all are. They remind me of, you know, um, because her puppy was acting like, yeah, exactly, acting like a puppy. you kill a puppy because they're acting like a puppy. That's, you know, yeah. So that is crazy. So yeah, again, a lot of this stuff that Trump does is like, to me, very psychopathic. He just doesn't seem to care much about about human life, but he's managed to convince a lot of maybe too many people that he is pace candidate, that, he's done well with this and he's done. They come from a long line of grifters, generations. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of it, unfortunately, a lot of people did buy into Trump being like anti-interventionist, uh, being, free speech, all that sort of stuff. A lot of the podcasters, they fell into that trap of believing all that stuff. And it's a shame because a lot of it is such BS. He was never for free speech. He was never anti-interventionist. He was never any of those things. So again, yeah, he's just lied and lied and lied. I think a lot of us are now seeing who he really is. The only positive thing about Donald Trump winning the election, and I'm not saying there is many positives, is that had he lost, people in the MAGA world might have still believed that he was the best thing since sliced bread. But because he won, a lot of people now get to see his lies unravel, right? So I'm not saying he should have won, but I'm saying that it's killed MAGA. Yeah. So I think in that regard, it's the only positive thing I see is that Trump has done so much damage to MAGA's reputation in terms of the economy, in terms of free speech, in terms of being anti-war, that Trump can't run, or MAGA can't run as that type of party anymore. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, I have to go, guys. Thank you so much for joining my Substack Live. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I'll download the video later, like it, repost it if you can. That'd be great. Helps me out, or make a comment on it, whatever you can. I really appreciate this. I love doing these Substack Lives. I'll do another one in a couple of days. Thank you so much, Dave from California. Thank you, Tar. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Marnie. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Trish, PJ. Thank you so much. Bathroom Guy, if you're still here. See you later, guys. Thank you. Have a great day.